Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this GSTEM chat. We have some very exciting people and interesting background, and this chat is about reality versus when they were at school. So we have, first person we have is Xena. She is, sorry, everyone, I'm pulling up something. We have Xena, who is a mechanical learning engineer with the company Novotel, and I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. And she have a master's in computational linguistics, and she also had studied in a foreign language and computer science in undergrad. Next, we have Richard Lee, who is a math teacher at Open High School in Richmond City. He graduated undergrad from VCU with applied mathematics and then got a master's from Grand Canyon Universities in secondary education. Finally, we got River, who has a degree in ecology, evolution, and environmental biology from Appalachian State University in 2015, and she mainly focused on plant biology. And her recent job recently, she worked on a mountain in Oregon, and she also was she did attend a wildlife firefighter boot camp. So again, I want to thank everyone for giving their time today and willing to answer my questions and also give more information for people out there who's looking into your field. So I guess my first question would be, tell us a little bit about yourself and what degree, go into a little bit more detail, what you guys did in undergrad, what you majored in, and what made you go pick that major. Xena, you could go first.
All right, so hi everyone, I'm Xena. I did my undergrad at Georgia Tech, and I started being really interested in foreign language, and then we were required to take a computer science class. And I was sort of afraid to do it just because it always seemed like out of my area, really. But I loved it. I fell in love with it immediately. And I went to my language professors and asked, like, how can I do both? And they talked to me about computational linguistics, which in a nutshell is pretty much like when you put something into Google and it auto-completes. So basically like language and technology. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And they told me I had to go to grad school for it. And I made like a big life plan. So I did computer science classes and then took foreign language classes, went on to grad school for computational linguistics, and then interned for the company that I'm working with now. And now I started working. So I basically do like the language and technology stuff at my job.
Which is pretty awesome. When I heard about how you went to a foreign language, but because you went to Georgia Tech, you have to do computer science class. It's, I guess, for that instance, it's pretty cool that they like forced you to do it, and you found a passion into merging two subjects together. That's pretty cool. Awesome. Richard, can you tell us about yourself?
Well, I could say I have just two undergrad degrees. Actually, associates in math. It's generally because it's very universal, or transferring to a four-year university was easier. The credits will transfer a lot better. And in general, I mean, that was the price was right for me to go through community college and then to VCU. And I continued the math track with the advice or from suggestion from my advisor that math is very universal, tons of jobs out there. So I was like, okay, you know, at least maybe have backup jobs teaching or doing other, maybe crunching numbers somewhere. So that's why I chose math as my degree.
And you want to go ahead and talk about how you decide. I know basically when you were going to VCU is apply math, and then near the end you realized you wanted to do teaching. What made you want to do that during your bachelor's?
Well, not exactly then. I tried the field out a little bit, didn't find as much success, was jumping between jobs, even a call center. So I some older friend of ours, my mom's friend, was suggesting, why don't you take this job survey just to see, what kind of personality traits might fit a certain job or your interests. And something at that time, I guess I was really wanted to connect with people more than to be behind a screen. So we eventually discovered teaching was one of them. I said, well, why don't I just invest in some teaching? So that's how I came to uh, put all my efforts into becoming a teacher.
Okay, thank you. And then River, can you tell us about your degree a little bit more, and also why did you pick it, and also what made you pick Appalachian?
Yes. Okay. So I have always been interested in the environment from a young age. But I originally went to school. I was encouraged by my parents to look into medicine because I'm a first generation college student. And so sometimes, parents push you towards the medicine, lawyer, those kind of things. And my cousin is a really successful doctor. So I think that that's kind of what they were hoping I would get into. So I tried it and I just realized that it was not for me. I'm squeamish, definitely. So I started looking into other avenues I could take in biology. I didn't know what a career as an environmentalist would look like. So I took an intro to botany, just like botany 101, and I immediately fell in love with plants. I don't know, there's just something so sophisticated and sleek, and their evolutionary history was just so interesting to me that I immediately just knew that that was going to be my life. And then when I started looking into just what kind of curriculum would help get me to where I wanted, I realized that the school I was at the time, it just didn't have any opportunities for me. So I just started searching for colleges that were kind of close to home from me, that had programs that I liked. Appalachian State had an herbarium I could work in. They had a greenhouse that I could work in. They had all of these very plant specific classes that I felt like I needed. So I just made the switch myself, and I loved it. It was on the side of a mountain. I could take botany classes and then walk outside and see the plants that I learned about growing out of the ground. And so I think that was just really rewarding and a good choice.
I guess the next thing that we will want to go into, talking about higher education. I know higher education is more money, a little bit more time, and they could be a little bit difficult. So I guess we'll go down each line to each person to talk about, can you tell me a little bit about your process of getting into your master's program, and what made you want to do it? I know, Xena, you talked a little bit about it. Can you just elaborate a little bit more how into the process? And was there any other majors that you could have done besides linguistics, or do you think that one was just like, that's the only one that was like merging of the two? Go ahead, Xena.
So there's also pursuing data science and just working with, it's called natural language processing. It's basically the same thing as computational linguistics, but the actual application. There are other schools with similar programs. I could have been a computer science major and approached it from that way. I could have done data science at a school that was close by. Usually that's what leads into it. The school that I went to for grad school, they actually had like a pure linguistics and then switched to the computational linguistics like program or a track that you could have taken. So there are like multiple avenues to get there, but there aren't a lot of schools that have a dedicated program for it. So when I found out about the field, I did a lot of research looking at schools that offered the program and then like what the requirements were. And the reason I chose the one that I actually went to was because it didn't require the GRE, which is like it's like the SAT or the ACT that you have to take before you get into undergrad. So for my program, it was focused less on, so like when you get your PhD, it's very, very academic. Mine was focused on going into industry. So basically just to prepare you for a job, sort of the way that like a trade school does. So I picked it just so that I didn't have to go through that step because I knew that I wanted to work at a job instead of like continue to get my PhD. So just to summarize, like I did a lot of research because I knew exactly what I was looking for. It was easier for me to just like look that up and then fit my undergrad programs to following that path.
And yeah, that brings up a very good question. That it was quite nice that you did not have to take the GRE. What was the college that you got your master's in?
So my college was University of Washington in Washington State. And that school in particular, like they have a lot of competitive programs, or like when you're an undergrad there, you have to compete to get into your major before you're actually officially in your major. So it was nice being able to skip that sort of.
Right.
By going to a different undergrad and then transferring in basically.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And was yours in person? Like you did all yours in person?
So I actually did the first year in person, and then they said they had an online option. And because I moved from Georgia all the way to the other corner of the country, I was like, I'm going home. And then COVID happened during my second year, so everything was online. But it had an online option, and I think for my field, they usually do have like a purely online option.
Oh, okay. That's good. Also good to hear. And for your grad school, were there scholarships that were given to you, or did you had to pay it? You had to find funding on your own?
So I had to find funding on my own mostly. It was more expensive because I was out of state, but I did get a $10,000 scholarship for the first year. It was like like an essay type. They give it to students who are really interested in the field, and that was another like competition sort of thing. But I did get it for the first year. I know that if you take the PhD track, there are more opportunities for funding because it's leading into research.
Oh, that makes sense. Thanks. Next is Richard. You got a master's in secondary education. Can you tell a little bit about why you decided to pick that school and why secondary education?
Well, the way the school works primarily is they crunch all the coursework instead of having split between the semester. It's like I don't know, it was like a month and a half each coursework, so it's very intensely. I felt like it would be easier to focus on one class at a time instead of multiple classes spread out. Just trying a little bit different, and the pricing seems pretty similar to some of the local universities, so that's why I chose Grand Canyon. But overall, as a teacher, there's actually laws behind it, kind of like nursing and medical and those kind of things. The laws behind it is you have to you're required to not only train all those in classroom material, but also have beyond CPR and those things is study hours, student teaching, and certain laws pretty much require you going through a school to receive a professional learning or professional teaching license. So I decided to get it, and I could have done it undergrad. So if people don't really plan to do it as a master's, it is an undergrad typically, but I already had a degree, so all I needed was one extra step through the master's degree, and it pays a little bit better. So since I say I'm gonna do it anyways, I might as well get paid a little bit more. So got my master's in secondary education.
Now, was yours all online?
Yes, all online because it's
And
all in Arizona. Terrible idea. Careful. Not terrible idea, but watch the deadlines. Arizona does not have daylight savings, so 3 hours for work could have been 2 hours and missing deadlines.
That is a new fact that I did not know. Uh, and then did you had to pay that all out of pocket, or did you get some scholarship from it?
There's some loans. The school itself didn't have any inherent scholarships, and I wasn't really aggressive in applying for any awards or scholarship. There are teaching grants and different programs within the local public schools, but I'm choosing not to take them on due to potential career change and just, yeah, mostly because of that.
And then, so you were working full-time as an open high school math teacher at Open High. So for your master's, did you have to do student teaching with that degree, or that because you were already teaching that you didn't have to do that, or you didn't have to do any teaching, like teacher assistants for that degree?
So you actually have to within the school requirement itself, at that period of time, I shouldn't have a job and really should dedicate, which they tell everyone to dedicate to student teaching. And there's about a month worth of student teaching. However, since I already had a job and contracted, they made a special exception. So they'll make some special exceptions if you already have a job, or if you get to a school, they really need a teacher and they sign you in, you're just going to be doing schoolwork on top of teaching, and they'll drop you in quick, especially if they have openings, lots of openings.
So the school gave you an exception because you were already teaching.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, and then here's a fun question. What is the hardest classes? Xena, starting from you first. What is the hardest classes for either undergrad or grad that you had to take?
For me, computer science was more of a means to an end for me, just so I could work with language. So the computer science classes were definitely the hardest. There was one that was just pure algorithms, and I still can't really wrap my head around this stuff, but it's good background knowledge. It does come in handy sometimes, but algorithms, I needed a lot of help with that.
What made you be able to pull on through? Did the school provide you assistance, like tutoring or something, or you just YouTube all the way?
YouTube, a lot of YouTube. There's also, at least for algorithms, like there are a lot of YouTube sort of like diagrams, or like especially like sorting algorithms. You can see like visualizations on YouTube, and that's perfect. That's what I needed.
Thanks. Richard?
I think math analysis, or they called it math 4-7, whatever, is the part where is you're proving math theories with pure logic, and you actually have to prove the theories of calculus, and that was the hardest. The math level is high enough where there is no tutors. They say good luck on your own. Really get group study. I think my professor was actually Italian, so it's like tough accent. So a lot of help from fellow classmates. And also I didn't finish the prerequisite class, so I was taking it at the same time, which was not a good idea either. Missing some building blocks right there.
Yes, good old math logic. River?
Okay, so I am a big picture gal. I like ecology. Organic chemistry was so difficult for me. I built it up in my brain to be this big, scary thing because everyone in my ecology program just, talked about how hard it was. And so I put it off until I was a senior in college because I was just terrified. And it's a lot of very small picture stuff. To me, when I'm learning about things that I can't see with my, right in front of me, it's just more difficult for me to absorb it and be interested in it. So for me, I lived, breathed. I did not have a life. I was just like, I'm gonna ace this class. It became everything that everything that I did. I got a tutor, I pulled all-nighters. I went through probably 2,000 flashcards, just trying, every trick I could to learn the information. And I ended up getting an A, and I was very proud of myself. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So anybody who wants to be a pre-med, that is one of your courses that you have to, you will probably have to take. Okay, I think we're going to take, I'm going to give you guys a little 2-second break while I talk about GSTEM week. And we're going to talk, the next we're going to talk about is diving into about working. So that's the fun one. So here's the little bit commercial. So we have a GSTEM week, the nonprofit, which we are focused on giving opportunities to girls who are in 7th through 12th grade to be able to experience firsthand some STEM subjects and also how it applies to real life. So this is a week long. It will be from July 11th through the 15th. And then the last day would be July 16th. So basically, we hosted our first one last year, and it was very successful. It was really awesome. The girls loved it. It was mostly all day, and they also lunch was provided for them to be able so they can eat. And then sometimes there will be chats. So each and every single day, there will be a science day, there will be a technology day, there will be engineering day, and there was a math day. I am talking about personal experience from a math day, that a little hint of it, they get to play a little bit Excel. I talked to them about a little bit of math. And also there were some speakers that were able to present, talking about how math is used in real life. So each girls, they also we might be doing a little bit things differently. But what we did last year is that each girls will be put into groups, and then they will focus on the topic. We'll give them a topic. Last year, awesome enough, we did a project on going to Mars. So basically they get to either pick if they want to do like water preservation or power or energy on Mars. So it was pretty awesome what the girls did and what they presented in doing with the projects, and seeing how they apply with each of the day for their project. And then they came up with some pretty awesome ideas at the end of it. So just letting everybody know, we're accepting applications now. So please send over, if you know anybody who is in 7th to 12th grade and they're really interested in see how STEM, or interested in how get a little taste of STEM of each week, and then send them over to GSTEM, and they could do the application. Okay, break's over, commercial's over. Let's talk about jobs. So I want to ask, what is your current job, and what do you do? So like, tell me how it's like your day-to-day, like what is, if you can, I know some of you guys are in some deep projects of like what that might not, but give us a high level, like just a brief summary of what you are doing in your jobs. Xena?
So I'm a machine learning engineer. I work with artificial intelligence, which sounds really impressive, but it's actually easier than it sounds. I usually do like language-based problems, or like we'll have technologies that work in English and I have to port it or find a way to make it work in other languages too, or maybe alter the code design a little bit to make it something that's easier to change to another language. It's a lot of coding. It's like solving problems really, or they're like big puzzles really. You or like a customer will come to us with a sort of like, I want speech recognition, but can you do it for Russian, and can you make it fit inside of a phone or something? And so they come to us with those problems, and then we solve it for them. Or not just me, it would be like a big team of 50 people, and then I just do the language part. but just basically using coding for solving language-related problems.
So, so that sounds amazing, just doing the languages into a machine, even though. So when you say programming, what are some of the softwares, or if you're allowed to, what are some of the softwares that you use for programming that?
So I usually program in Python. I use Jupyter Notebooks a lot, like a lot. So I would definitely pick up that skill if you're interested in computer science, like try to use it. For artificial intelligence things, we do a lot of open source work. So there's tools called Fast AI, there's PyTorch. If you want to do language stuff, there is NLTK is really good. And then big tools that are made by like Facebook and Google, like Word2Vec and Facebook's Wave2Vec. Then there's also something called SciPy. There's also scikit-learn. I'm just saying a lot of words really, but there are a lot of tools that we use, or like they all have very specific purposes. And it's like if you want to do language processing using Spacey or NLTK, that can like separate sentences or take words apart or even part of speech tag. So like say which things are nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And it's like when I say it's like a puzzle, you like put those pieces together.
Awesome. And then there is, I'm guessing, and this is my guess, just my experience with knowing, hearing about the field a little bit, is that is there also, do you have to work with, do your company like use SQL to store like the languages and to separate them in text? Or is it they're just pulling from just straight from the source?
It kind of depends on where our data is coming from. We do use SQL a lot.
Okay.
Personally, I actually haven't used it. I think it's just like the team that would be working on a problem would be so big that there are people whose like their entire job is just organizing SQL databases. And then I'm like, okay, let me attach this piece to this piece and then send it to the database.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Awesome. Richard, can you tell us a little bit about your day? I know is that you're more teaching in your audience, and who you're working with is teachers, and then the people who are your customers, I guess, would be the students, your high school students.
Yes, well, the major interaction is with the students, occasionally parents, parent-teacher conference, and other teachers, colleagues. It can be helpful depending on how situations are. We might collab and do some things together. So the bulk of teaching is, at least right now, is C hours regarding in teaching. But there's also a lot of, how should we say, after work. So some jobs you might do a job, you can clock out and be good to go. With teaching, when you're face to face and solving problems and resolving questions, you don't really have a space to breathe or, let's say, grade assignments or build new assignments, or even just collecting the data that you need. So it's almost an instantaneous thing to solve problems by minute basis, and then yeah, keeping those social skills and elaborating ideas. But then the after work, outside of hours, I mean, depending on your situation, you may have, you usually get some planning time. But then if you have a really heavy workload, like teaching 3 preps right now, which is like 3 different topics: AP Stats, Pre-Calculus, and Algebra 2. All at the same time, you have students moving at different pacings, different tasks. So it's not like one worksheet that applies to everybody, but multiple worksheet, multiple tests, multiple tasks to do, multiple grading and did a collection for each and every group. So there's not enough time, depending on how everything is within that scheduled planning period. So a lot of teachers do outside work, especially grading, creating new assignments, planning, and those things in general. And then if you add clubs on top, also doing a little bit chess club for the students right now. And so that takes up some time here and there as well. But that's the bulk of it, apart from lots of professional development. So meetings, throw in some meetings as well. And those meetings can happen after school or outside of teaching hours. And the requirement behind those sometimes can be lenient or it can be pretty strict. So it really depends, but it feel like time flashing by for sure when you're going through teaching.
And then with you teaching, with all the different subjects you are teaching, do you feel like you know more about the subject than you were learning in high school or college now that you've been teaching it?
That's true. You get more refined in vocabulary and some of the sub-knowledge that if you're in school, you wouldn't really need it but when you're teaching, you have to have access to all those, maybe or even multiple different paths to solving a problem that will work for a particular student that has maybe difficult processing the same way or the other ways that you have available.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Richard. River, you have done so many different types of jobs with plants. Tell us about just the different options you took and which one, and your most recent one, actually your two most recent ones, and how, yeah, just tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so I haven't gone to grad school yet. I do plan on doing that, but the way that things worked out, I just ended up graduating earlier than I thought that I would. So I didn't really have time to make another plan for grad school. So I decided to just get as much experience as possible to try to figure out exactly what I wanted to do before I went to grad school. I don't think people really realize how many opportunities there are in the plant world. It's a huge field right now, just the sort of green, environmental field. I mean, we need so many people in it. But for me, my career took a ton of twists and turns. I wanted to see if I had any interest in horticulture, which isn't really science, but I was working with a gardener at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. I got a horticulture certificate and I looked into implementing native plants into ornamental gardens to try to just increase the number of pollinators. And I don't know, I have a soft spot for native plants. So I got super into horticulture, and then I got really into houseplants because I have greenhouse experience. I loved working in a greenhouse in college. So it was just really fun for me to be around indoor plants. I lived in New York City, and I just had a lot of fun and found a lot of success in trying to green up people's spaces, like their living spaces. And so I did that for a little while. But then when COVID happened, I, like most people, was given the opportunity to kind of slow down and assess if I was happy with where my career was going, if I was happy with what I was doing. And I found that even though I loved aspects of horticulture, I love physical labor. I really love just like a hard day of work and coming home and just feeling like I really did something. So I didn't want to give that up. And I didn't like feeling like I was gardening, just for people who didn't really appreciate it. I didn't feel like I was doing it for any greater purpose. So I started looking into revegetation projects with the National Park Service. So I would still be doing I would still be out there doing my hard physical labor. I would be planting things, I would be propagating things, I'd be working in a greenhouse, but the garden that I would be planting wouldn't just be, like a yuppie, New York garden. It would be a respected national park. I just really felt like I needed the greater purpose. So I made the switch over and I worked at Crater Lake National Park in Oregon over the summer, which was the most incredible experience I've ever had. So my typical day would start with waking up at 6 in the morning, packing my lunch, and then reporting to work. And usually, I would get my pack together, which, weighed from 20 to 40 pounds, depending on if we were carrying pesticides that day. And then I would hike all day. I would get to hike through the backcountry into areas of this national park that no one else was allowed to be at. And what I would be doing when I wasn't doing re-veg work, it turned out not to be as much re-veg as I originally thought it would be. It was a lot of surveying, which I found out that I love to do. It's really fun. So I would put my pack on, start walking, and just think to myself, like, I don't know how long it's going to be until I get to stop walking. And sometimes it would be just all day, just hiking, which felt amazing. Being outside, eating lunch outside. And most of the areas that I surveyed in the park were actually old burn areas. So on the West Coast, there's a lot of fire, which I have never had any experience with. I grew up on the East Coast. And so fire is a pretty typical part of the landscape. It's something that happens every year. They just call it fire season. It's just totally normal. And so I was hiking into these areas that sometimes they were just completely barren, nothing there, but just burnt trees and, just getting to study what is growing back and when. And something that I focused on my normal day-to-day would be looking for invasive plants that get a leg up because of the bare soil and because of the disturbance. Just in a national park, like there's no place for that. You're supposed to be preserving an area, and it's most native. I don't know. You're just really looking to preserve the natural environment. So, we would survey, find invasive plants, work all day removing them, take data of what's growing where, and that data would be revisited every year. And then teams, would go to those same spots every year to make sure that native plants are growing there. So it was really just awesome.
And of course, you got to talk a little bit about your wildfire firefighting boot camp too.
So like I said, I've never really experienced fire. I've never experienced fire season. I've never done plant surveys in an area where it's just burnt. Like I just didn't even realize that was a huge part of the work needed right now. There's just so many opportunities in the world of fire. It's its own specific niche job community. And as much as I didn't love waking up and it being smoky outside every day, it was kind of a struggle working in that sort of environment. There is a need for, they call them resource advisors or READs. They're basically liaisons for protecting the forest that the firefighters are working in a sense. It's like, how can we fight this fire, but also try to make as little impact on the forest that is still intact? How can we, most of the ways that they fight fires is they'll dig these large trenches to try to remove fuel so the fire, doesn't have anything to burn and might put itself out. But how are we choosing where to dig those trenches? Someone's got to be there to be like, we can't dig a trench here. You're going to be digging through a rare plant, or you're going to be upsetting a population of endangered owls, or someone is usually there to make sure that decisions are being made with, environmental health in mind. And then those trenches that they dig, a botanist has to come back and reseed all of the trenches to make sure that plants grow back there, because sometimes the entire seed bank could be removed. It just depends on how deep they dig the trenches. So I didn't know that job existed until I worked out there this winter. And when I found that out, I was just like, oh my gosh, like that sounds like such cool work. That's what I want to do. But you have to get your red card. That's what they call it, your red card, before you can work on any active fire. You have to have a red card. And to get a red card, you basically have to take classes and learn about fire behavior, how to fight a wildfire, which I just found so fascinating. I didn't think I would find it as interesting as I did, but there's just so many different techniques, so many different things that influence fire behavior and the way that they choose to fight a fire. And, you know, there's just like thousands of people on a fire. I just felt like fighting a little war. Like it just felt like so like intense, and like I just got really excited about it. So I'm going to do a season fighting fire before I move into doing resource advising, because I feel like in order to be a effective resource advisor, I need to be able to know how to talk to firefighters who might have a different agenda, or I feel like it's frustrating for firefighters sometimes who work with resource advisors that don't know what it's like to be digging line all day for 16 hours and working, you know, in the smoke. And so there is a disconnect, I feel like, from what I can tell sometimes between firefighters and the biological resource advisors. So I'm trying to bridge that right now.
And that's amazing, because that's some thinking that you see the disconnect, and you thought about how you could actually fix that disconnect. And yeah, so you do one season of it. There definitely, it's not like you didn't experience any of it. You just went straight to your resources.
Exactly.
This is a good question to bridge with, and also I'm going to ask this question to Richard and also Xena. We're going to go the other way around. River is going first this time. So with that in mind, when you learn your major in school at Appalachian, how much of that major has actually helped you in all the different jobs that you have done so far?
Gosh, you know, it's hard. I would not trade my education for the world, but I will say that I think my education helped me so much because I played such an active role in choosing my own curriculum, and I was very lucky that I had that option to just choose very niche and very specific classes for myself, working with my advisor to kind of take classes that maybe didn't fit into my degree, but I could, you know, just find caveats and work with them to get my credits covered by classes that might not have counted. But my advisors were so wonderful to work with. They really enjoyed me advocating for myself. And, you know, even though I didn't have much energy, like I went out of my way to try to work in the herbarium as a volunteer, to volunteer in the greenhouse, to try to help with research where I could. And it's those things that you do for yourself. You're not just doing the bare minimum with your education. You're really pushing to make it a very personalized experience. I still get hired because of my volunteer herbarium work, my volunteer greenhouse work, you know, those very specific skills that I got, that if I had just gone and just done whatever they told me to do, like maybe I wouldn't have left with those skills. So yeah, I think my education really did help me, but I encourage you to really push and advocate for yourself while you're there.
Yeah, very good point. Thanks, River. Richard, with you, how did your major, your bachelor's in math help you how you're teaching now? Or did your master's in secondary education, did that help you in how you teaching and how you are supposed to teach, or what you're teaching now to the kids?
I will say kind of like what River mentioned about being very niched and specific. I mean, the math is great. You get to a high level, so understanding concepts is very easy. However, delivering it is another story, and all the rules behind just the process of being a teacher, the requirements, the mandates, and just the delivery process, communication, and management. time management, planning, all those things. Those are came from the master's degree. So the general degree in math is as general and universal as it goes, but really specific is probably more important because it's more direct, more intentional, and pretty much what the job requires.
Makes sense. Thanks, Richard. And Xena, how I'm curious to understand like your foreign language that you learn and how is that helping you in your career right now? And also, how did your master's help you with, if that did help you in your career right now?
So for me, in undergrad, I had a really similar experience to what River described. I had to be my own advocate because they didn't have a direct path that was like, this is exactly the classes you need to take to get to where you're trying to go. I had to go work with my advisors and advocate for myself and say, I need these classes to, or like, I'm interested in these classes. And I think that pertains to the work that I want to do. So I was very goal focused and I always wanted to work with language. So I tried taking like as many language classes as they would let me take. And I got like a very surface level understanding of them, but I think that's the sort of experience that they liked about me when I applied for my job, because I have such a broad knowledge of a lot of things. And especially when working with languages or making sure that technology considers other languages besides English, um, general knowledge or like exposure, at least to other languages, really gave me a leg up over my peers. So I I focused on classes that I thought would be good for my personal interests and personal growth, and my job really found value in that. So like my education was like really, really valuable for the job that I have today.
Awesome. That is a very helpful, and with each of you guys have in common is that think for yourself and do what you guys are passionate about. And that brings us to the next two questions that I have to ask. Is this question's going to go to all you guys. At GSTEM, our motto is to instill confidence, influence critical thinking, and inspire the next generation of women in STEM. By doing this, our goal is to increase the diversity of girls in future STEM and other professional careers where their technical skills can be applied. Why do you believe it is important for girls to be at the table or take on roles in STEM? Xena, would you take the pleasure of going first?
Well, I definitely think like the more people you can get facing a problem, the more perspectives you get. And you can think of different things that other people may not think of, or different perspectives as to like, well, this solution may work for some people, but not for this other group. Or you're not thinking of people who have to worry about XYZ. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but there are a lot of technologies that are made for like that sort of like white male, like 25 to 30 sort of range, which is because, those was a lot of the times people who work with technology. And STEM is a really big field too, but in terms of like what I work with, definitely having more women gives a lot more information that they can work with, and it's always best just to have different perspectives and to be able to think of every case that you can to make sure that everything's accessible and it can work for the most amount of people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your point on that. Richard, coming from a male point, how do you feel, why do you believe that it's important for girls to be at the table?
I would say it's a matter of expressing a freedom, because due to the constraints and about been hearing about stereotypical roles between different genders, but reality is there is no limit in STEM field, and having that opportunity, or even if they even have a resemblance in the distribution of population of both of all the genders in the STEM field, you at least get, just as Xena said, proper perspective and to see different view, and just in general being able to work with different people, and the expression of freedom as in, we really can do what we want and we shouldn't be limited to what other people say. And then your efficiency and the passion will just be way, I would say, much more on a grander scheme when we're solving problems.
That's also a good point. River, your take?
I've had a lot of weird jobs in my life. But in every job I've ever worked, I've just seen, I mean, I'm kind of repeating, but I've just seen women bring a different perspective, and just, I don't know, just bring a different angle, a different way of thinking sometimes. I'll say definitely working in a lot of male dominated fields like horticulture and botany, which that's changing. I mean, my team at Crater Lake was mostly women. I just think that we can approach situations with sometimes a little bit more empathy and maybe a little bit less ego. And I think that that is just such a necessary approach if we're going to be, saving our planet or trying to figure out how to take care of everyone's needs on this planet. It's just going to take a certain level of care that I mean, that's just one of our strengths as a gender, and I'm really proud of what I bring to the table when I approach problem solving with a team. And yeah, I also think that, I mean, it's hard to deny that in human history, it was kind of like science by men, sometimes for men. It was just a male dominated field, and sometimes our needs got overlooked sometimes. I mean, I was just reading an example the other day about how a study was done to figure out the ideal office temperature for productivity. And so they did all of these studies on the male metabolic rate. And that became the standard idea for, this temperature in an office to make everyone the most productive. But what they didn't realize in their study, because they only studied men, is that women run at a different metabolic rate and have a completely different comfortable temperature. So women in offices were cold and uncomfortable for decades until, someone else figured it out that, we have different needs. Ultimately, we just sometimes have different needs. And so I think the more women that we have in science, the more progress we make for each other's well-being. And just like Xena said, I just think it's about accessibility and making sure that everyone's different needs are met. So
that makes sense. So I'm going to ask you this question and then we're going to go down the line. River, I know you have some experience with the process of working, like applying through the government, and also in this job that you did. What can you say about working, at least for this, how you got into, was it hard getting into the government at Crater Lake, and are there other options? And then how long did you have to wait for the process to hear back?
So the process for applying for the government, and anyone will tell you this, is just, it's a lot. And I will say, USA Jobs, that's where I look for all of my government jobs. And I type in specifically botany or biological science technician. And, they do a lot of hiring from within. So you get preferential rehire. So sometimes they'll post a job listing, even though they know that they're going to hire someone back, and you might not hear back from them at all. So that can be frustrating. I keep a large spreadsheet of everything I applied to and who I've heard back from, because sometimes it's just hard to keep track. But I will say with Crater Lake, I love to ask questions in an interview. And one of the questions I love to ask is like, is there anything on my resume that you see that concerns you or that you have any questions about? It's so important to ask questions. And I found that out so late in the game, which makes sense as to why it was so hard for me to get hired. But I asked that question to the person hiring me, and they told me that for the government specifically, it's not like a nice snappy 2-page resume. They want a 10-page, 13-page. I know people that have 16-page resumes where every single duty that they had at the job is clearly bulleted and listed. And here I was handing in something that was 1 page long because I thought that's what looked good. And so I didn't know that. So I have done a lot of work expanding that. And, you know, there are options that aren't necessarily in the federal government, especially there's a lot of public land out west. East is mostly private state-owned land, so that would be a different hiring process. There are also, you know, just like special interest groups doing conservation all over the country. I love Conservation Job Board. One of my colleagues turned me on to that, and that will show you so many different options. There's just so many cool jobs happening in the conservation field right now. So I look every day just because I'm interested, but yeah.
That's very helpful. So if anybody is in biology major, plant major, check out USA Jobs also, right?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Thanks. And then Richard, I guess this job is easy. What was the hiring process for you? Because you came out of VCU with a bachelor's, but not in teaching, but in applied math. What was the process of you getting there and getting to where you're at full-time teacher? And then I guess this is kind of known to everybody, but at least in Richmond, are they hiring any particular as a teacher in math or science or any other fields?
Math and science fields are very in demand right now. I was in one meeting, they said, "You're a math teacher, you must be one of the unicorns." I guess it must be really rare, and lots of openings as of right now. But sometimes it's not as rare, but there still tend to be some openings here and there. And that's just the high turnover rate depending on where you teach at. The hiring process for me, at least initially with just a bachelor's, without the teaching requirements, did not necessarily land me my foot in the door in teaching itself as a full-time contracted teacher. It was more of a substitute, but then they needed a spot, so they hired me in as a long-term substitute kind of position, which have a higher rate and pretty much almost cover the same duties as teacher. But depending on the requirements, I may need at that time, I did not need a provisional license, but over time, when you do take on a full-time contracted position, you will need a either provisional teaching license or a professional teaching license. So it's very job specific, and there are mandates around it.
Thanks, Richard. And then Xena, for you, how was your hiring process? I know you said you did an internship, so I guess let us know how you went through the internship, and then what was the process from the internship to your job? And then are there any internships in your job now or opportunities that you know of?
Yeah, so I did start as an intern. I actually, very interestingly, I went through every single state on Indeed and typed in natural language processing because I was determined to find a good fit. And luckily I did. The internship was really collaborative. They had us working together on projects. We had people directing us and helping us through learning how to work with government contracting and like how to approach problems and the differences between working in industry and then working in group projects at school. So that was really helpful. And then after I got an offer from the internship, which as far as I know, or me and my friends' experiences, internships generally are how they hire. So if you get the internship, you're pretty good. So after the internship, they had us working with them part-time, which was great. And then I did that while I finished up school and then transitioned to full-time. And they made that process really smooth for us, or gave us like a lot of flexibility, and then tried to fit us into how can we ease you into a project. So I got a lot of guidance from my higher ups and people within my department, sort of helping me make the change from academics to real work life.
Oh, so you did an internship and then a co-op and then full time. Wow.
Yep.
Was it hard to manage a co-op and doing school?
Yes, definitely. I was taking classes part-time just because that's how the hours worked out with my last year. And then I was working part-time, and they did give me a lot of flexibility, which I really appreciated. But it was like I'd have to really structure my day between when do I work for them and when do I focus on like finishing up my projects and my presentations. And I had to take some time off from working with them because I had to focus on school. And then like I had easy weeks and I had really, really rough weeks. So it's definitely a challenge doing a co-op and like, doing the whole school versus work balance. Definitely glad I'm not doing that anymore because that was awful. But, I'm really grateful that I had that support while I was doing it.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. And then do you know if there's any internships coming up or
Oh, right.
opportunities in your company?
So we're actually hiring, or we're doing interviews for interns right now, and I think that the listing is still up. Yeah, so if anyone's interested in machine learning or AI and you're really excited about getting into the industry, the company's name is spelled Novetta. And yeah, they're really looking for people who are super, super passionate about AI, and they try to look for people who, you don't have to have a master's degree to do it. I did when I applied, but they do also take people in undergrad, and we actually have like a high schooler interning too. That was pretty cool. So if you're super passionate about AI, I would definitely recommend looking up the company and at least reading about the internship and like seeing the work that they do on their website and stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we are at the end of the hour. I just want to thank you guys so much for willing to chat. I do want to say one more thing that I think will be pretty cool. If there's anything within your field, what is one advice that you will give to girls or guys, anybody who is in your field with that you have experienced? Xena, I'll let you go first.
My motto has always been, just because I feel like I don't deserve it doesn't mean that I shouldn't give it my all. Like there are so many times I felt like I wasn't good enough, or that other people or my peers were doing better than me or were more worthy of my job, or maybe I just didn't know enough or I didn't try hard enough. But, as long as you give it your best and you put in like, even if it's just as much effort as you can give each day, definitely just keep at it and remind yourself that even if it doesn't feel like you are the best for your position, they picked you for a reason and they're working with you for a reason, and you got into the classes that you're taking for a reason. So yeah, just keep at it.
Great quote. Richard?
Well, my advice would be many times you hear about just showing up and just being there. So there's many ups and downs. But what really keeps it going is when you hear students say, Richard's my favorite teacher, or I learned a whole lot, or I really got something. And so those are those moments and those things that matter, that you can't exchange or can't really find, depending on what field you're working in.
Yeah, that's very good motivation for some people who wants to be a teacher. River, what about you?
Oh man. Okay, let's see. I think something that, can be daunting when you study plants is there's just so many of them. That turns a lot of people off. There's a lot of, very hard to pronounce words to describe little hairs underneath the leaf, or, you know, there's a lot of daunting stuff that you have to learn about. But I think the coolest thing about the field is that you can't know everything. As soon as you move to a different part of the country, as soon as you move to just 2 hours away to a different mountainside, like, you are relearning the environment. You are being humbled every second of every day that you work in this field. And to me, that's very freeing. I don't find a lot of competitive attitude in the botanical field, because, you know, sometimes everyone's throwing their hands up and just saying, I don't know what this is, let's figure it out together. And that's the kind of environment I like to work in. And also in my field, just like, you work hard, but at the end of the day, you really feel like your efforts are going towards bettering the planet. And so that can be daunting. Just like the physical nature of the job itself can, you know, be daunting, but your work is so valuable. I mean, working in conservation is just, we need people so bad right now. So just know that every day that you're out there working, you are contributing to making the planet a better place.
Thank you. I just want to give a round of applause for our wonderful guests, that you guys were able to give the time to talk about your career and also talk about your school, and then also being able to talk about what is the difference between those two and how much you have learned from both, where you guys are at now. So thank you everybody, for who decide to watch this event. My name is Ann Allen, and I am head of math for GSTEM. And our next event will be Giving Tuesday on November 30th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you enjoyed today's event, the next chat will be our last chat for the year. So it will be virtual, 21.7. A look into computer science, which will take place in December 7th. And we can't wait to see you. So please, I advise to give a little bit, as much as you can, to our Giving Tuesday. It goes into our GSTEM, and it goes into just us wanting to give experiences for the girls. So if you give $25 or more, I think there will be a nice little gift for you, I believe. All right, thank you everyone. Have a good night.